Hello everyone, and today we're going to be addressing the elephant in the room, the newest big contender to the modern metagame, which is going to be the branded Despia deck. Now of course there's going to be a lot of splashable engines and splashable decks you can play with branded, but in order to give people a better idea of what the actual core deck is, we're going to be doing this version first. This is arguably going to be the most powerful way of playing it. It's definitely the most common way of playing it, and it has been getting a lot of decent results. I played a few different versions of it. I think this version so far is the one I'm having the most success with. I was playing 40 card versions. For some reason 40 cards never, I don't know, it was very inconsistent. I think this version here is a lot stronger. There are a lot of cards you can sort of cut and play and increase and do whatever with. We're going to talk about those at the end whenever we go into our full detailed deck breakdown. In the meantime, what we're going to be doing is same thing as always, jump into some gameplay, talk about some of the cards, and at the end we're going to break it all down. So if you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, feel free to subscribe and leave a comment down below for what you want to be seeing, and let me know what your favorite hybrid decks are when it comes to branded. Like, what do you like splashing the branded fusion into? I've been testing this and like a Dark Magician type build. It would be a lot stronger if we had Dragoon, but you know, what are you going to do? So just tell me what you like splashing branded in with. We have lots and lots of things to play around with, so again, feel free to go ahead. We do have a few really interesting games lined up here. I didn't want to just show like the core standard stuff, because again, this isn't exactly new. You guys have seen all of this before I'm covering it because I'm late to the game, but we're going to be going over some of the more interesting matchups. So again, like I said, if you want to see more, just let me know. And yeah, let's just get the train going and get into game number one. Alright, here we have game number one here. It's going to be a very fun one. We're going to open up with Alibur the Jester of Despia, searching for our branded fusion. Luckily, we already have branded in red in hand, which makes our combo a lot easier. We're going to branded fuse into Lebellion, triggering of course Lebellion's effect as well as the Despian Tragedy. Tragedy is going to search our deck for a monster, and the Lebellion is going to allow us to fusion summon by shuffling back from graveyard and field to deck. Going to shuffle back to summon out the Mirror Jade, the Ace Blade Dragon. That is non-targeting, banishing any monster on the field. We can special summon Spriggan because we have a Mirror Jade on the field. Search for one, return one. We search for the branded lost, set our branded in red, and we are set up. So we have a branded red for Poppage, we have Mirror Jade, and now the Harpy's Feather Duster is really going to heavily limit our options. So we sort of regret shuffling back the Effect Veiler now at this point, because we're not getting a lot of value out of this, but our branded in red at least is going to allow us to summon the first Dark Lord. Why are we summoning the first Dark Lord? I know a lot of people are used to seeing the Chimera coming off of this card. Well, in this situation, the Chimera is not going to do anything for us. We would have to pop at least one card to get the draw effect. You don't get to draw two if you don't pop one, so you need to get all inclusive. Because of that, we might as well get some value out of the first Dark Lord. Dramaturge here is going to add summon the Alibur, and we're going to grab Dramaturge, and the first Dark Lord here of course is going to summon Dramaturge from the hand. You also could have technically gone into something like Dragostapelia, but we didn't want, you know, we hadn't used up our Mirror Jade's banishment yet, so there was a few options, there was a few plays, definitely, for sure. I don't know if the first Dark Lord was the best one, but again, in my head it sort of generated a lot of value. But our opponent has Dark Ruler no more anyway, so it doesn't matter what monster we summoned. Our opponent here has the Pot of Duality, of course, revealing that they are playing Floowandereeze, which is everyone's favorite. Jack in the hand, of course, giving them another Floowandereeze monster. We're going to pick one to add to our hand. We're going to grab the Eaglin to try and be disruptive, but of course our opponent has the Rabina. They also already had the Eaglin in hand, which, you know, fair and balanced, you know, you do you, Chief. I guess he's just that good. He's going to search for and then summon his M-Pen. Now we're going to make a small mistake here. I was getting sick of the prompts for the Mirror Jade, so I activated it now just to get the Albion into the graveyard for its effect at the end of the turn. I should have used my head and realized that our opponent has a way of messing that up a little bit. He's going to add the Rabina back to his hand. Here he's going to search his deck for the Trap card here. The Trap card, of course, allows him to summon on our turn. The Stree is going to banish the Albion from the graveyard. He's also going to get his Barrier Statue. Into the battlefield, he can take out our first Dark Lord by reducing us down. He's going to take out our Albion, so we still have a few monsters on the field. You know, we're not completely out of the game yet, so we should for sure still have plays. Now, because our Mirror Jade was negated last turn, we can send the Glory Dragon to the graveyard to banish that Impen, so that puts us in very good stead, but of course we need rid of that barrier statue. Our opponent, before we go in the battle phase, is going to use their Trap Court to summon Rabina. Then he's going to add the Eaglin back to his hand. Rabina then is going to search his deck, I believe, for another Rabina. Yeah, because he already had all of his other Floowandereeze in play. He's going to summon his Eaglin here, and that's going to activate the Toucan to add back to his hand. And he's also going to be able to search his deck for a big Winged Beast monster and then normal summon it, basically. So he's going to search for Razia the Mega Monarch. He's going to normal summon then Razia by tributing 2. That's going to basically bounce 2 cards on our field back to the hand, as well as 1 from his graveyard to the top of the deck. So not a fantastic situation for us to be in. He is drastically reducing the overall power of our field, but we still do have Kit on the field. Kit's going to take out that barrier statue at the very least. In the main phase 2, now without the statue, no more interruption, we can freely use our branded fusion to go into Lebellion. Lebellion then is going to ditch this useless Eaglin to fusion summon yet again. Tragedy, yet again going to be searching our deck for a monster. This time it's going to search for another Aliber. The Searing Dragon then is going to shuffle back the Albion, actually, that was banished in order to recycle it here for our Mirror Jade's effect. So now this turn we have both an Albion and a Glory Dragon in the graveyard. We're going to search our deck for Despia, Feeder of the Branded, just to set up a Masquerade Dragon here using our Dramaturge and our Kit. Not only does that put Masquerade on the field, it also puts the Dramaturge on the field. His extra deck negate isn't useful against this particular opponent, but our opponent can only remove so many monsters, so just having another 3k beater on the field here is going to make it very difficult for him to make any major plays, especially with an Impen and a Razia banished. We're really limiting his actual endgame plays. He's going to use the Dark Ruler No More that he stacked on top of his deck. He's going to go into Rabina here. Rabina's going to add back the Eaglin as well as search his deck for another monster, allowing him to normal summon. So he's going to search for a Stree. Now he's going to summon Stree, but Stree manipulates the graveyard, meaning of course the Ghost Bell can negate it. So not only did we have the Mercurier to negate one of their cards, we had the Branded in Red to pop some of their cards. We also had the Ghost Bell, which specifically negates the Stree because it manipulates the graveyard. So we had basically 3 massive interruptions here against our opponent. They realized that now without their additional summons, they're just going to get absolutely slaughtered on the following turn. And that's just life. So yeah, really fun back and forth duel, honestly, which is not something you get to say a lot against Floowandereeze. They either completely blow you out because you can't play, or you completely blow them out because they brick. But having an actual back and forth duel like that was pretty entertaining, as well as the fact that they had the Dark Ruler No More. So the deck being able to still keep up and play through, even through something like a double Dark Ruler No More, is a testament to how resilient the deck really is. You're constantly having follow-up, you're constantly summoning, fusioning, recycling resources. So the deck it forever has a follow-up, which is really cool. The variety of ways in which it can get rid of cards is really cool. In this game, you saw us go into a lot of different avenues. You didn't see the actual main avenue, which is the Chimera, which we'll get to in a moment, but you saw things like the first Dark Lord, the Lebellion sequencing, the shuffling back, the Masquerade, the Mirror Jade. Saw loads of really cool stuff, as well as the Dramaturge, which is not a card that everyone's playing, but it is definitely one of my favorites. I love that card. But yeah, that's pretty much it for game number 1. Very fun back and forth here against Floowandereeze. Let's get into game number 2. Alrighty, getting into game 2. We're actually going second here, but honestly that's not that big of a concern, especially looking at this hand, Max C and Super Poly. We are loving it. So our opponent's going to go for reasoning here. They're going to mill cards from the top of their deck. They only get to mill the 1, which is unfortunate for our opponent, but it does give them a 3 monster. But of course, them being the Chad that they are, also have that Grasslook Screener. So they opened up with that Grasslook Screener and reasoning. So I don't know how reasonable that is, but I was not happy about it. They end their board here with a Witchcrafter Hane and a Schmidt, as well as a face down card. They're also going to get to add a bunch of their spells and traps in the graveyard back to their hand. So ultimately not a broken like turn 1 board. I think it's, and these guys aren't the first like Witchcrafter guys I've seen trying to make this work. That's really cool that I'm seeing more Witchcrafters. I really like seeing them back in Duel links. I haven't really seen them in Master Duel as of yet. So these guys are really cool being able to see them coming back, and they're actually having a lot of decent plays. So they're going to banish a bunch of cards from their graveyard. We're going to chain to that our branded opening. I can't remember why I chained it, but we're going to ditch our Ad Libitum to summon out the Aliber. Aliber then is going to activate to search our deck for a card. He's going to imperm this, and I think at this point, yeah, we chain our Super Poly because our opponent has a light and a dark on the field in the form of their Witchcrafter and their Hane, so we're going to get rid of 2 of their interruptions at once, as well as our Aliber, protecting it from the imperm by summoning out a Priskenion. So that was like a 4-for-1 deal right there. That was an amazing activation. We also have the branded fusion now off of the Aliber. The Schmidt and the Witchcrafter Scroll are going to send themselves to the graveyard to do a bunch of stuff. Just general Witchcrafter things. They're going to summon out another Madame Verre, which basically she can reveal, I think it's like a spell card, and then completely negate all of your monsters. So we're going to activate Lebellion at this point. I think this is when our opponent goes for their Verre play. It is indeed. So they're going to basically negate all of our current face-up monsters, so Lebellion does not get to fusion summon. We do of course still grab the Dramaturge of Despia from the deck, which is still fine. We're going to activate Branded in Red, we're going to add back the Ad Libitum and fuse 3 here into the Guardian Chimera. So Guardian Chimera basically has an effect where you draw or pop cards on its summon. For every monster on the field you use for its summon, you pop 1. For every monster in your hand you use, you draw 1. So we use 1 on the field and 2 in the hand, we pop 1, draw 2. And of course the effects of Ad Libitum and Dramaturge both activate, so Ad Libitum is going to summon out the Searing Dragon to the field, the Dramaturge is going to summon itself out to the field, so we're going to have 33, 32, 3000 and 2500 attack points against an open field. So completely decimated our opponent, blew their back out against like what, 4-ish interruptions. They had the Imperm, they had the Madame Verre twice, they had the Hane to be popping cards, so they had a lot of interruption on their side, and it would normally have been a little bit difficult to get through that, but again, this deck just doesn't care, it just keeps going. And that's part of why I like it so much. Yeah, I am definitely a big fan. I don't know if it's more fun than when it was just the Despia stuff. I don't know which is more entertaining, but this is definitely going to be very effective. So 100% would recommend. If you don't have it, I would recommend at least trying it. And yeah, we're going to get into game number 3 before I go off on a tangent. So let's get on with that. Alrighty, getting into game number 3, we are going first, and we have the Aliber in hand. You'll love to see it. We have the double max C, which isn't that great, Albaz, which isn't that great, but you know what, we still have the things we need to get going. We're going to summon out our Lebellion here, we're going to discard 1, get rid of one of the max Cs, we don't need them, to fusion summon, and then we're also going to use the Tragedy in the graveyard to get searching. We're going to cover that combo at the end. We're going to grab the Ad Libitum here, which is going to be pretty important for our full combo. Mirror Jade then is we're going to activate it to send Albion to the graveyard and banish our own monster here. We're going to polymerize in the Masquerade as well, just because we know the Ad Libitum is going to be able to basically resummon the Aliber to the field. The reason we banished it earlier on is to put Albion in the graveyard to place a Branded in Red on our field at the end of the turn. So now our Mirror Jade's effect is dead, yes, but whenever we use Branded in Red, we're going to be able to grab our Ad Libitum from the graveyard, use Ad Libitum, Aliber and Mirror Jade in a fusion summon to pop 2, draw 1 with Chimera, and also resummon a live Mirror Jade. So we're going to cover that combo towards the end. Our opponent here is going to go for a branded fusion of their own. They're going to have to pay 600 life points per activation. We're going to go for a max C here to limit them. Our opponent is of course going to have that Cult by the Grave. Them using it up to beat the max C while annoying also means that they're much less likely to have one in order to stop our Branded in Red. Remember, Branded in Red has to return a card from your graveyard back to your hand, so Call by the Grave is a massive counter to that card. Our opponent's going to go into a Lebellion of their own, pay the tax to activate its effect. We're going to use our Branded in Red to add Ad Libitum back to our hand. Our opponent's going to show us some interesting tech here in regards to the Libellion activation, we're just going to go straight into our Chimera. We're going to activate it early. We made a small misplay here. This is before I knew you needed to be able to resolve both sides of the effect. So big oopsie from us. Learn from this mistake, because it does cost us the game. We are of course going to be able to get our Mirror Jade back at the very least, which is live and has a banish, but our opponent has one of their own. So we're sort of twiddling our thumbs, waiting around here. Our opponent having the Despia Invader, constantly just paying life points, paying. They paid over half their life points now at this point because of a single Masquerade. A double Masquerade would have been lethal here at this point. Our opponent goes for the Fader. At this stage, we're going to bite the bullet. We're going to go for the Mirror Jade. They're going to pay another 600 to use their own Mirror Jade. Remember, if a Mirror Jade leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, it gets rid of all monsters your opponent controls at the end of that turn. I decided to banish the Denier because I didn't want them to be able to go into a DPE off of one of their regular fusion spells, because they had the Malicious as well face up, so they could have summoned the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. They're going to take out our Masquerade here. Finally, they only got 2k life points left, and then they're going to grab Branded Fusion at the end of their turn. We have the Brigand, which is going to add a Fallen of Albaz to our hand. We could have summoned it, but we wouldn't have had anything to discard. Our Fury here is using the Fallen of Albaz. We're going to be able to fuse with one of his cards here by discarding the Branded Opening. We're going to banish the Tragedy to resummon, basically grab back, the Branded in red that's on our graveyard. Masquerade, of course, is going to be able to resummon itself, and Branded Opening is going to be able to discard one to summon out the Dramaturge. So Masquerade as well comes back, and our Tragedy also sets the Branded in red for some follow-up. So we're not in a terrible position. Our field is going to get wiped, and we're very well aware of that. But by that same token, we're not really all that stressed. We have to bite the bullet eventually. We may as well do it now. Our opponent's going to negate the Dramaturge here for some reason. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because at the end of this turn we're getting wiped. Them having that Aliber face up is actually a problem because it means that they're going to continue to have a face up card. Gold Sark is meaningless here. Main phase 1, they're going to go into the Branded Fusion that they added to their hand the previous turn. Going to go into Libellion. They're going to discard one here, and they're actually going to shuffle back their Denier and Malicious to summon out the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. Amazing tech that at the time I wasn't playing. I considered it, I just wasn't huge on the idea. Branded in red here, of course, adding back the Fallen of Albaz to the hand, and they're going to fuse it and the Libellion to go into another Mirror Jade. So they've got basically Mirror Jade to banish one non-targeting. They have the DPE to destroy one non-targeting, and our opponent knows that full well. So Branded in red is going to add back a Dramaturge to fuse with our Chimera. We know the monster we summon is getting banished, but we're doing this because we can then, at the very least, resummon the Dramaturge to the field, as well as get the effect of our Quiritis. So we're just fortifying our defense at this point. We are sort of on the back foot. We need to be aware of that. We're going to summon out the Dramaturge here. We're going to summon out an Aliber, just so Aliber can search our deck for opening. We're keeping ourselves alive, and we're trying to set up a little bit of follow-up. That's basically all we can do at this stage. So he's going to swing in, he's going to do a lot of damage. He still has that Masquerade, so we still have to pay a fine every time we use a card, but our opponent is pretty low on life points as well. All we need is one card to turn this around for us. We draw into Called by the Grave, which isn't great. Branded Opening is going to ditch it to search our deck for Aliber. Aliber is going to grab Branded in red, and we're going to activate the Branded in red now, but our opponent knows exactly what we're up to, so he's going to preemptively use his DPE to pop our Aliber, meaning we don't have an additional monster to target for our Branded in red fusion. So our opponent knew exactly what we were up to. We didn't have a lot of other options, I'll be perfectly honest. I know a lot of people are going to look at that and think, what's going on? Why didn't you expect that? I did expect that. But like, what else were you going to do? Our opponent also added to their hand the Super Poly of the Gold Sark, but we have nothing, and the Mirror Jade slaps us about the ring. But yeah, that is what it is. Again, the one deck we lost to here out of these videos was the Mirror Match, and our opponent had some pretty interesting tech there. There's a lot of really cool things you can do in that slot. Our opponent had DPE. You can also do things like Dragoon if it was legal, or if you're playing the Dark Magician version, you can still technically do the Dragon Knight, which is still a pretty decent card. It's not like broken, but it's alright. But yeah, lots of really interesting potential when it comes to this deck. There's no one way of playing it for sure. DPE is probably going to end up in the final version, but I don't know. Again, it's just going to take a lot of testing out. I've been liking the version that I showed at the start, and we're going to be breaking it down in just a moment, but just know that there's lots of ways of playing it. But yeah, let's get into the deck profile. Alrighty, so getting into the deck profile, like I said just a moment ago, before you go into this, know that there are tons of ways of playing this deck, ranging between 40 to 60 cards. People just play whatever the hell they want because it offers a lot of flexibility. So there's a lot of different ways of playing it. There's a lot of cards here that people maybe don't play. A lot of this is fairly standard looking, to be fair. But yeah, this is the version of the deck I've been having the most sort of success with, and I have been liking this version of it a lot more than the 40 card versions I was testing. So let's break it down here. We're going to start off by cutting the fluff, as it were, all of the hand traps and interruptions and such. We're playing double effect failure, fantastic card, even better now with the Labellion and everything, being able to stop the branded fusion. Max C is self-explanatory, Ash Blossom, self-explanatory. Ghost Bell is a card I've started using a lot recently because it negates branded in red, it negates Labellion, it negates the Restree from the Floowandereeze matchups. So there's a lot of cards, as well as, like, you know, your standard things like revivals and your Call by the Grave and things. So Ghost Spell had niche usage beforehand. It was pretty okay, it was pretty good. Now it's going to be extremely powerful because of Despia being able to stop branded in red, being able to stop Labellion. So it's really cool. I like this card a lot. Again, it can be whatever you want, and double Call by the Grave again because pretty much mandatory. And you can technically say Super Poly is also sort of falling into that category. I would disagree. I think Super Poly is extremely important to any Despia deck purely because of the versatility of a lot of your fusions, and the Albaz version brings even more to that, being able to Super Poly into the likes of Meter Jade using any extra deck monster. That's pretty nuts. So I think Super Poly is while not technically core, I would say is pretty important. But yeah, we're going to break this down. A lot of this isn't too different to the Despia things that we were talking about before, so we're going to briefly talk about the branded fusion combo. So branded fusion is basically a one card god card for this deck, and for many decks in the near future. You fusion summon a fusion monster that lists your Fallen of Albaz by sending from your deck to the graveyard the materials. It also locks you in the fusions for that turn. That's why we're only playing fusions in the extra deck. You can play Verte Anaconda if you want. I ended up cutting it because I never used it, and I really want the Dragostapelia. But yeah, so that basically the branded infusion lets you fusion summon out one of your Albaz fusion monsters by sending from deck to graveyard, and that sets up a lot of potential plays. So what is the actual main play? So you'll normally activate branded fusion, then you'll fusion summon into Labellion the Searing Dragon. Labellion the Searing Dragon on summon, discard 1 to fusion summon again by shuffling from your field, graveyard and banish pile back into the deck. So usually you'll summon Labellion will discard 1, it will fuse itself and the Albaz that is now in your graveyard to go into your Mirror Jade. Now, what are you using to fuse into this? You're using a Dark Monster and any Fallen of Albaz. So the Dark Monster of choice is going to be the Despian Tragedy. Whenever this guy is sent to the graveyard or banished, by a card effect, he will search your deck for a Despia monster. So basically, it's either going to set up your Alibur if you haven't used it that turn, or your Ad Libitum if you don't have Ad Libitum. Ad Libitum's pretty important to the combo, and we'll get to that in a moment. So you're going to send Tragedy, you're going to send Albaz, you're going to fuse into the Searing Dragon. Tragedy's probably going to be grabbing you Ad Libitum. If you already have this guy, you can grab whatever you want, really. There's a few options, but Ad Libitum is pretty important. So Searing Dragon fuses back into the deck here to summon out your Mirror Jade. Mirror Jade will send a monster from your extra deck to the graveyard in order to banish a card on the field, non-targeting, and it can be used once every 2 turns. So if you have a way of searching for your branded in red, or if you already opened up with your branded in red, normally you'll just set it and pass with your Mirror Jade on the field. If you do not have branded in red, what you will do is you will banish any other monster on your field or your opponent's field if you're going second, and you will send Albion the branded dragon to the graveyard to banish a monster on the field in order to use Albion's effect in the end phase to set a branded spell or trap directly from the deck. So you're going to set the branded in red. So essentially, hopefully you have the branded in red already, or you have an Aliber to search for the branded in red if you've already opened branded fusion. Usually if you open up branded fusion or Aliber, you've got the full combo and it's going to set everything up for you. So ultimately, the only thing you really need to worry about after that is the follow-up then. So you've got Mirror Jade on the field and you've got branded in red set. So what are you actually going to be doing? Well, on your opponent's turn, you're going to be using your Mirror Jade to banish. If you already haven't, you can banish with your Mirror Jade. So that's banish 1, non-targeting. Your branded in red is going to add a Despia monster from your graveyard back to your hand and allow you to conduct a fusion summon. So you're going to add back the Tragedy. So you have Tragedy and Ad Libitum, which you searched for on your first turn, as well as your Mirror Jade. You're going to fuse all 3 of those monsters. You're going to summon out the Guardian Chimera. Guardian Chimera is going to pop 1, draw 2, because you used Mirror Jade on the field, 2 in the hand. So there's your second pop of the field, and that's non-targeting destruction. That's draw 2 cards. So Guardian Chimera is pretty busted. He's also untargetable if you have Poly in the grave, but that's another thing. So you summon out the Chimera, and what then happens to your Chimera is chain link 1. Then you have the effects of both Tragedy, which will search your deck for another Despia monster for either follow-up or something you're missing, and then Ad Libitum is going to resummon one of your level 8 or higher fusion monsters. Well, what is one of your fusion monsters? The Mirror Jade, and this is a soft once per turn, so you're going to use Ad Libitum to summon back the Mirror Jade, and it can banish again, which is pretty nuts. So basically you're getting, ideally speaking, 2 non-targeting banishes and non-targeting pop with an additional draw 2 on top of anything else you can do. You're getting that full combo off of 1 card. You still have 4 other cards in your hand, 5 if you're going second, to do whatever you want with. So that's the main sort of combos and plays. It's very straightforward once you've actually played it. I know it's difficult to visualize without actually seeing it on your screen. We sort of did it in the gameplay, but yeah, very, very straightforward. So what else are we playing here? Fallen of Alabaz we're playing because we have to. We are playing the Edge and Chain package, the Freight for Patchwork package. So basically, Freight for Patchwork is a card that will allow you to add an Edge, Imp, Monster, and Polymerization from deck to hand with no cost. So we play Poly and Edge and Chain. This card is only here for the Freight for Patchwork. If this guy's sent to the graveyard, it can also search for a Freight for Patchwork. So Edge and Chain is a very, very strong card in that regard. It's a dark monster, so it helps with your fusions. So ultimately, just adds a lot of versatility and card advantage to your deck with the versatility of Polymerization. So yeah, Tragedies for your main combo. And this guy can also banish himself from the graveyard to recycle a branded Speller Trap in the graveyard. So that's kind of cool. It comes up sometimes. So Tragedy, then your Edge and Chain. Albaz we're playing just for its name. Aliber the Jester of Despia, all normal summons, search for a branded Speller Trap card. It also has a secondary effect where if one of your fusion monsters leaves the field, it can resummon itself to the field by negating the effect of one of your opponent's fusion monsters. So that effect comes up sometimes. We have Tri-Brigade Mercurier. Basically, if you control a fusion monster that lists the Fallen of Alabaz, this guy will be able to discard himself to negate a monster effect. So very, very strong. He's also searchable off of your Brigand the Glory Dragon. So if you send this guy to the graveyard by either, technically by summoning it and then going to the grave, or by sending it to the graveyard off of Mirror Jade's effect, you can search for the Mercurier, and then that's an extra negate. If this guy is banished, then you can also search your deck for a Fallen of Alabaz or another monster that lists it. What's another monster that lists it? The next monster on our list, Spriggan's Kit. Spriggan's Kit, when summoned, will search your deck for a branded Speller Trap card that is banished or in your deck or graveyard, add it back to your hand. So it's like Aliber in that regard, except you need to shuffle a card from your hand back into the deck afterwards. So it's not quite as good as Aliber, but it does have an effect where if you control a fusion monster that lists your Albaz, you can special summon it. So it's like a secondary Aliber you can use in the same turn. So I'm a big fan of Kit. She's not the best card in the world, but I'm definitely a big fan of having the additional search. She can help you grab your Branded Lost, your Theater, stuff like that if you already have the rest of your play. But yeah, very, very strong. Dramaturge, one of my favorite cards. Whenever he's used as fusion material, you can resummon him from wherever he was sent. So he's a 3k beater that is so easy to summon, and if a fusion, synchro, XC, or link monster is summoned, you can target a monster on the field and negate its effect, and that includes you summoning those cards. So whenever basically one of those monsters is summoned, you get to negate, and it's not, they don't have to be summoned using their own effects. They don't have to be summoned from the extra deck. So for example, if you have a Masquerade Dragon in your graveyard and you just revive it, that's enough to trigger a Dramaturge. So Dramaturge is really cool. I really am a big fan, but you don't need more than one. I think one's fine. And lastly, for the monsters, we have Ad Libitum of Despia. So this is part of the main combo. Whenever it uses fusion material, you'll resummon one of your level 8 or higher fusions or one of your Despia monsters. So this guy will basically be the one to recycle your Mirror Jade, or, you know, recycle whatever else you may have. Again, useful in a whole different range of ways. You can bump this guy up. I think a lot of people play him at 2 or 3. I think 1 is fine, but at the same time, sometimes you want to open up more monsters. So if you're going to bump up anything, I would probably bump this guy up first. But yeah, that's it for the monsters. Polymerization, pretty self-explanatory. Fusion summon, searchable off of Patchwork. It protects your Chimera. It's kind of cool. So I'm a big fan of Poly. I will play it at 2. Foolish Burial, send a monster from deck to graveyard. Usually that's sending your Tragedy to trigger its effect, although it could be sending a range of other cards as well. But mainly the Tragedy, so that you can search your deck for a Despia monster. Gold Sark, again, triggers the Tragedy at the same time. This also, however, triggers your Mercurier. Mercurier, whenever it's banished, will search your deck for Kit. So this can trigger both Tragedy and Kit. So this is like a slightly stronger version, except Foolish Burial sets you up for Branded in Red. So both of them are really, really cool cards. You can play one of them, play both of them, play none of them. It's up to you. They're not necessarily core. 3 Branded Fusion, of course. We have Despia, Theater of the Branded. It's like, this card isn't necessary as such. It's much more important in the actual pure Despia version, but in this version, it's not that big a deal. It lets you fusion summon. It's basically like a once per turn poly, which is really cool. But if you have a non-fusion fairy monster that leaves the field by your opponent's card effect or destroyed by battle, you can resummon one of your fusion monsters. So if you have like an Alibur that has resummoned itself using its effect and it gets destroyed, you can then resummon something like your Mirror Jade back to the field. So it is really cool in that regard. Plus it's searchable. So I figure 1 to have it searched just for that recursion effect alone is enough. The additional fusion plays are also pretty handy. Branded Lost is an interesting card. Basically it means that your activation of your fusion cards can't be negated. Now their effects can still be negated, but the activations cannot. Meaning if your opponent Ash Blossoms your Branded Fusion, you're still cooked. But yeah, generally speaking, this card's fine. It has a secondary effect where if you fusion summon something, you can add a Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions different deck to hand, so it can add your Mercurier or your Kit. So it's kind of nice in that regard, but it's not too important. You can cut it if you want. If you don't want to look for another UR, it's fine. Super Poly, for obvious reasons. All of your fusions require generic materials, so very, very strong card in this deck. Branded Opening, discard a card to summon a Despia monster from the deck, and it can also banish itself from the graveyard to protect your fusions from destruction, so extremely versatile. Really, really strong starter. This is an easy way to get access to your Alibur, or maybe extend into another monster like your Dramaturge if you already have your full setup. So Branded Opening, very, very versatile card, extremely powerful, big fan. And lastly, the core fusion card of the deck, probably second to Branded Fusion, is Branded in Red. Target a Despia monster in the graveyard or Fallen of Albaz technically. Add it back to your hand, conduct a fusion summon by banishing the materials from your hand or field. Very, very powerful. It helps you go into your Chimera plays very easily, but it also helps you facilitate most of these monsters with relative ease. Now, I appreciate I've been talking here for a long time, so we're just going to go quick fire through the extra deck. Starving Venom for Super Poly, Dragostapelia mainly for Super Poly, but can also be quite easily summoned off of Lebellion as well, so bear that in mind. Dragostapelia is a very strong card. Titaniclad, mainly for Super Poly, but sometimes Mirror Jade. Brigand the Glory Dragon, mainly for Mirror Jade material, so that it can search for your Recourier when it's sent to the graveyard. We have Sprind, which is one of the more powerful sort of spin-off Albaz fusions. You can basically move it from one zone to another, and then it destroys any other monsters in that column, which is kind of cool. Doesn't come up very often, but it's a very good super poly target because its other material is just any effect monster special summon that turn. So you can use any of your opponent's special summoned effect monsters, which is kind of cool. We have Albion, of course, which is the main target to be sent off of the Mirror Jade. It will let you set a branded spell or trap card at the end phase of the turn it was sent to the graveyard. Very nice. Quiritus, reduce everything to 0, special summon a Fallen of Albaz or Despia on destruction. Really, really cool card. Masquerade, your opponent has to pay that 600 life point tax every time they want to activate a card, but it can also revive itself if your opponent has an extra deck monster on board. Mirror Jade, of course, the monster everybody is talking about. Non-targeting, banish a card in the field by sending one of these bad boys to the graveyard, who then get their effects in the end phase. So kind of cool, 3k attack, and if he leaves the field because of your opponent's card, just nuke your opponent's whole board during the end phase of that turn. So very, very powerful card, frighteningly so. Then we have Lebellion, core in the combo to conduct an additional fusion summon. Chimera, core in the follow-up, sort of, you know, pop a bunch of cards, draw a bunch of cards, easily summoned off of your branded in red. So Chimera is an extremely popular and powerful option. I'm really choking back a cough here. Priskenion, of course, Despia monster, light and dark monster, which is a really good super poly target, any Despia, light and dark, so it's a good way of getting rid of 3 monsters from the field, which is very strong. And lastly, of course, is the first Dark Lord. Protects all your fairies from being targeted, pay 1,000 life points to revive a fairy or summon one from the hand. So he's a good way at extending into Dramaturge if you didn't have another way of doing so. Also recycling your Alibur to get its effect multiple times. So ultimately, the first Dark Lord, you won't use it very often, but I am a big fan. Although if you really wanted to squeeze Predaplant Vertanaconda in here, you would probably cut this guy. But yeah, ultimately that's the deck. That's my version of it, at least. Having a whole bunch of fun here with it. Let me discard changes so you can see the full thing again with all the hand traps and stuff. This is the version of it I'm playing. Of course, you don't have to play the same ratios. You can bring it down to 40 cards if you want. You know, you can cut the kit. You can bring down the patchwork. You can do all sorts to sort of bring it down. I wouldn't recommend playing less hand traps and stuff. But ultimately, yeah, relatively straightforward version of playing it. Really straightforward build. The deck itself isn't all that complicated, but it is all that powerful. So basically, good luck and have fun when it comes to this. It's not that hard to counter either. It's not as if it's without its counters. It's beat by things like Effect Failure and Imperm. Imperm's a very good option. I just don't have the space for it. Ghost Bell, again, is very strong against the Albaz, very strong in the mirror match. Called by the Grave is very strong in the mirror match. Super Poly is exceptional in the mirror match. And then, generally speaking, Ash Blossom and Maxi are pretty good cards, just all around, all the time. So yeah, that's my take on the deck. You can leave anything you would want to do or change down below in the comments. I'll sort of get everyone that leaves a comment to sort of see what everyone's ideas are. Is this the best way of playing it? I mean, it's not too far off. I would say this is sort of roughly what everyone else is doing, to be fair. It's not like super original. I know not a lot of people are playing things like Kit and Dramaturge, but I think those cards are pretty good. So yeah. You'd leave it down below what you like, any changes you would make, any sort of big cards or hints or combos that I'm missing that potentially like is making me look like an idiot. Go ahead. Again, I don't claim to be a professional. But yes, that's everything I have to say. If you like what you're seeing, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.